Hello, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Hope everybody is doing well. I've had a very, very long day today, so I am pretty done. I'm pretty beaten. I'm pretty tired. So we will likely keep this a shorter than normal Songwriting Simplified tonight. So if you're all wondering, and you probably are, why my partner in crime, Jonny is not here, and also why we're on my channel and not his, Jonny has had something come up very last minute, and he called me and said, hey, can you just do a solo show tonight, because I am not going to be able to make it because something has come up that I need to attend to immediately. So I said, sure, that's fine. So here we are. So I think we had planned to talk about the use, I don't recall whether that was for this week or, no, I can't quite remember, but I think we had planned to talk about using and making use of tension and release in music. So talking about dissonance and that kind of thing. So I would rather do that when Jonny is here. So we will postpone doing that subject to next week. So tonight, I'm going to make this I know we kind of, last week we did a bit of an open Q&A thing last week. But I kind of, thought I don't want to do the subject that we had planned to do tonight. Just I didn't want to do it without Jonny here, because I know he'd get a kick out of this particular subject that we had thought of doing. So instead, I'm just actually going to extend that kind of Q&A thing that we did last week into tonight, and we will make it a shorter show. So if you didn't get a chance to get a question answered last week, and you'd really like one answered this week, now is your chance. This is bonus Q&A time. Because I know that when I'm with Jonny, quite often we don't get to everybody's questions. So, yeah, I just think it would be a nice idea to give you guys a bit of an extra chance to ask some questions. And you can ask any questions to do with songwriting. So we can talk about lyric writing, we can talk about rhyme, not rhyme, we can talk about harmony, we can talk about melody, we can talk about form, structure, we can talk about instrumentation, arranging, we can talk about all of those subjects. And, we can even open things a little bit beyond the normal scope of Songwriting Simplified as well. If you would like to do that, we can do that. I have no problem doing that just a little bit. Mika says, take the night off. Hope's all okay. Jonny's got AC. Yes, he does. He does have air conditioning. We don't really need that here in Scotland because it doesn't, generally speaking, get hot enough to warrant it. But occasionally it does. Last summer was definitely a case in point where it definitely got hot enough for us to require, hang on, I'm just watching my volumes here. Okay. It definitely got hot enough for us to have needed air conditioning if we had it, but houses here in Scotland they're not installed with it because it just, generally speaking, doesn't get hot enough. However, as I say, last summer was a case where it really did get awfully, awfully hot and uncomfortable. The temperature was well up in the late 80s, early 90s. And for Scotland, that is extremely hot. So yeah, air conditioning was obviously a problem. And that's even with all the windows in the house open, it was still too hot. So, and, we've got massive, great big windows in the ceiling, in the roof upstairs that we can just throw wide open, and they're like gaping holes in the roof. So, yeah. Let's see. Mika has a question. Just Bob before that asks probably the first question of the evening, and he says, "Sorry, I'm late." You're not late. You're just fine, Bob. Absolutely just fine. Just Bob. Absolutely. DDD Entertainment is here. I should have gone through who's actually here, and then I'll get to Mika's question. So Ken was the first in the door, followed by Bill Shep and Thomas Melkerson and Bud Box Guitars and John Lake. And Mika came in, and then the second Tony came in, and Dwayne 552 is also here. And as I just said, Didi is here as well. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all, and I'm glad you're here. It is a small gathering tonight. There is only a baker's dozen, I think, of us here, which is, in military terms, one squad. But that's okay. I don't mind it being a little bit low on the numbers tonight. It means that you guys, all 12, 13 of you, have my undivided attention. So, Mika's question was, what was the hottest gig you ever played? Ever worry about hot gear in the sun at outdoors gigs? The hottest one I ever played was playing a military parade. In my youth, I was in a Royal Navy big band, so I was in the Navy for a short period of time, and we had to play parades, and one of those was was one of our home parades on our base, and we were out on the parade ground, and it was stiflingly hot, and there was no wind, no wind at all, no wind. It was pretty awful, and I was playing drums for this particular gig, although I sometimes play bass with the Navy big band. But on this particular occasion, I was playing drums, and the heat was so intense that, you know, I could see my tom heads starting to wrinkle a bit because they were getting that hot. And whenever I touched my cymbals, it was just like I could have cracked an egg open and fried an egg on my ride cymbal. It was that hot. And I was concerned because I was obviously wearing the big, thick dress suit jacket, shirt, and I was wearing the hat as well. And those hats don't keep you cool. Trust me, Navy hats just don't keep you cool at all. And I was really concerned that, you know, I was going to burn at the back of my neck, which is actually, it's the only part of my body that actually burns in the sun. Everywhere else just goes brown pretty much instantly. You know, I can be out in the sun for, you know, half an hour, 40 minutes, and I am brown, just like that. And that's all probably to do with my ethnicity more than anything else. But yeah, it was incredibly hot, and I was definitely worried about my gear. So yeah, that I'm trying to think what the temperature must have been. It must have been like mid-90s, I think, which you know, for Scotland is incredibly hot. Let's see, what else do we have? Miami, Mika says, in Miami, my car said it was 105. Wow, that is incredibly hot. Just Bob says, I have no idea why I hit the question mark. Well, it made for interesting reading, which always helps. And he follows that up with an actual question. He says, I sent you a song called Heal the World a couple of months ago to review. I was picked for the release from my mixed master. Curious as to your critique. I will get back to you. Things the last couple of months have been incredibly hectic. For a variety of reasons. None of which I'm going to go into particularly. Suffice to say, I have been incredibly busy. But I will definitely get back to you on that critique. I promise you that. Budbox is talking to Mika. He says, I loaned a multi-effect pedal to a fellow guitarist at a festival I was playing at one time. I found it in a cow pat in the middle of a field the next day. Oh dear God. That's not very nice. But it still worked. It still worked for another 10 years. That's nice. Ken says pouring rain scares me more than heat, and you know what? I have played outdoor gigs in the rain. Again, I have to go back to my Navy days for that. When I was actually in the parade band on this particular occasion, playing side drum, and there were 4 of us, and all the other guys were playing this way because they were right-handed, and so it's just like 3 right-handers, and then me on the end playing left-handed. You know what? I may as well have not been bothering to play my drum and just kind of like held it out to the rain, and it would have done the job for me. Maybe not quite as rhythmically accurate and precise, but it certainly would have done the job because it was absolutely lashing it down. But, parades don't stop because of the rain. You have to do them. And, even though the public attendance at this parade was tiny because of the weather, and yes, we did have thunderbolts and lightning, and it was occasionally a little bit frightening because there were some fairly close lightning strikes which were incredibly loud, like ear-ringing loud. And that made that fun. But yeah, I may as well just held out the drum like that and just gone, okay, rain, do your best paradiddle. And yeah, so that was entertaining, to say the least. Raindrops, drum drops. Yeah, exactly. And of course, I would have quite happily, I would have quite happily just taken the money and just held out the drum and said, here you go, easy gig. Apart from the fact that I was completely drenched all the way through to my underwear, which was soaking wet as well. I would have sat down and it's just like there would have been a puddle around me deep enough for you to put fish in, and then the fish would have swum around. It was one of those kind of days. I am glad those days are long, long, long ago, to be very honest. But yeah, and I've played some other fun gigs where it's been glorious sunshine and it's been perfect conditions, and we've been in a marquee on this other occasion, and you'd think, great, it's fine, we're in a marquee, no problem. If the weather's good, people will be outside, and it'll be great. And we're out of the heat of the sun, and we're in the cool of the shade of this marquee. Perfect. It was for about 2 hours. And then out of nowhere, a huge thunderstorm brewed up out of literally nowhere. And we were playing really loud because we were having to compete with the thunderstorm. And the marquee, it was hilarious because the marquee had that kind of right-angled roof kind of thing going on, and I think the whole thing was only held up by I think maybe 3 central posts, and then everything was tied to it by guide ropes and that kind of thing. So anyway, the rain was so intense that it bowed in the middle like this, right above where the audience was, and this big bulge appeared where all the rainwater had congregated. And we were just sat on the stage going, that's going to go. When is it going to go? And, our sound guy was pretty much right underneath the kind of the rear end of it from his perspective. And we're just like, yeah, all of that sound gear is just going to get completely fritzed, and that'll be the end of the show. And so we carried on playing. It's just like, but we were watching this bulge just grow, and every now and then people were looking up like this, going, oh my God. And people started shifting about more and more uncomfortably, just waiting for this thing to just go whoosh and drop its load on everybody. But we got to the end of the show, and we even played 2 encores. and this big, massive bulge didn't give way. And as soon as we had finished that second encore, the audience went, yeah, that's great. That's great. Fine. Thanks. Bye. And just almost as one, they were out of the door of the marquee. And then about 3 minutes after the last person left, the roof could take it no more. And yes, our PA did get completely fritzed by the water. But fortunately, it made it through the show. So there we go. And we managed to get a brand new PA for the next gig, which was also a bonus because our gear was starting to get a little bit old. But we ended up with a brand new PA at the end of, out of this particular event because we were able to claim on the insurance under the Act of God clause because it was a thunderstorm. You can't really do anything about that. So we claimed, and we thought, hey, it's a long shot. We'll claim under Act of God, the Act of God clause in the insurance, and we thought, nah, they'll never pay out because ultimately it was the poor design of the marquee. That could be argued, but they didn't. That was that. So there you go. Gigs in eccentric weather in Scotland. Budbox Guitars says you should try riding a motorcycle for a couple of hours through a storm. Yeah. That is one thing I have never ever done is I have never ridden a motorcycle. I've ridden a bike. I haven't ridden a bike for a long time. The last time I rode a bike was in 2006 in Chicago. And then the time before that was in 1995. There you go. 1995 to 2006. So like 11 years, didn't ride a bike. And then 2006. And I haven't ridden a bike since. My kids have bikes. And we keep talking about me and my wife getting bikes. But I don't know. I haven't ridden one for so long. It's just like, will I be able to do it again? I know what they say, once you learn how to ride a bike, that's it. You can ride a bike forever. I don't know how true that is. So we have 12 people here. I think we did have 13 at one point. We do have 13. But yeah, we are kind of holding about 13 people. So we are about 20 minutes into this, guys. So please do get your questions in the chat. And let's see if we can stay broadly around the songwriting kind of idea. Mika says in the US, an act of God provides a loophole for the insurance company to not pay, for they know not what the Lord might do, which apparently might be anything. Yeah, well. Yeah, you can argue it in the reverse here in the UK. Which is great because, that's just nasty. That interpretation of it is just nasty because then they could pretty much say, hey, if it's an act of God, that means anything. They could just say, oh, you fell off your bike. That's an act of God. There was a breeze and you fell off your bike. They could, and they go, and that's why we're not going to insure you. Which I think is quite nasty. So anyway, Ken says, fell off a moped in Greece. I'll never ride a motorcycle. Not safe for me. Yeah. The bass player that I have had in my band for probably the last 25 years. Yeah. Nearly 25 years. He has been in one or t'other of my bands. And he started off with a moped, and he rode that for a little while, and he started getting faster and more powerful bikes, and nowadays he's not a bass player anymore. Well, he still is. He still plays bass, but he doesn't do it professionally anymore. He is a professional motorcycle racer. That's what he does. He competes in the British the British racing championships here in the UK, and he's very good. And he rides an incredibly powerful machine. And I've been to see a couple of his races because there is a race circuit up here in Scotland. So whenever he comes up here, it's not that far away from me. So, I can actually take the bus and get about 90% of the way there. And then I can get a cab for the last wee bit to get to the circuit. And so I've seen him race, and I would not want to have that thing. I would not want to be sitting on two wheels going at 210 miles an hour. Thank you very much. That's just no. I would not want to do that. But he does, because he's crazy. Hello, Bobby Booth. I'm glad you're here, my friend. Welcome. As you can see, I'm on my own tonight. So it's question time. Songwriter's question time. Maybe that's what we should call this. Instead of Songwriting Simplified, call it Songwriter's question time. Something like that. Let's see. Just Bob says, for recording bass or guitar, do you prefer straight or curled chords? I've read that a lot of the curled ones are better, but no explanations as to why. I've actually recorded with both. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I had a whole bunch of curled cables. Mostly for aesthetic reasons. I just quite like the look of them. And also the fact that you don't have to wind them. You don't have to kind of wind them to keep them nice and neat and tidy. And, when you're hanging them up or putting them away. There's no need to do that. And I kind of, I can be pretty lazy about cabling. So I had those curled ones. And to be honest, I have never really heard in my ears a whole lot of difference between straight and curled. It's like hair. You either prefer one or the other, I think. Some folks like straight hair, some folks like curly hair. I'm one of those that, when I had hair, was in possession of incredibly curly hair. Which I never, I've not had hair like that for years, like nearly 20 years now. Let's see, but that's a good question. Curled or straight? Yeah. I actually, for the most part, I have straight now. I don't have any curl cables at all. Was your friend Jasper Carrot? I'm not sure to what you're referring there, but just Bob's talking to Bud Box Guitars. Mika is quite correct. Coils can induce and or receive interference, like a loop antenna. Yeah, they can certainly do that. I suppose it depends upon the quality of the curled cable. But yes, there is always that risk. Have you ever written, this is DD, have you ever written a song and then changed the style completely, keeping the same lyrics? That is a fantastic question. And yes is the answer. I have done this. In fact, I have an entire hard drive filled with bits and pieces of different songs that were never finished in different styles. They start off as an idea and then for whatever reason they kind of get abandoned. For, I don't know. There's like a whole bunch of reasons why they might get abandoned. But as I say, I've got a whole hard drive filled with them. I don't get rid of them. And here's the reason why I don't get rid of those. It's because you just never know when something is going to come in handy. And in fact, my EP from 2016, the title track, Belonging to Tomorrow, actually was based upon the melody of one of those abandoned songs, but with the harmonic concepts of a completely other song. And I married the two together And then it was a case of making my lyrics, kind of editing my lyrics to fit the melody. And I didn't really have to change the melody too terribly much to make them fit this other set of chord changes. Kind of a little bit of editing here, there. But, basically just I sellotaped this song together and it became the title track, Belonging to Tomorrow. And it worked out really, really well, because that whole song is all about a particular type of tension. I mean, that whole record was all about exploring different tense situations or complicated situations. And Belonging to Tomorrow refers to the word procrastination, which comes from a Greek word. It's actually kind of more Latin than Greek, actually. I'm correcting myself. It's actually a Latin word, not a Greek word. Which basically means that the thing belongs to tomorrow. And that's essentially what procrastination is. You're putting something off to a later date, a future date. And that's what procrastination, the literal word, means. And I thought, belonging to tomorrow, that's a great little hook line. And so that's kind of where the idea for the song came from. And so each verse is a different narrative of that kind of procrastination. So, it starts out, soon I'll write a letter I know I'll never send. And it's just like, and those, and then it goes up it explores that tension and takes the tension up a little bit more with each verse. And it also goes up a half step with each verse. So you start in the key of G and then you end up in the key of B flat. So you've gone up like a minor third. Which is something else that whole record explores, which is chord changes related by minor thirds, which is a harmonic idea that I really have enjoyed getting into the last few years. And I am working on a new EP. I'm not quite sure when it's going to be finished or when it's going to be available. But yeah, I'm working on a whole bunch of new songs. So we're looking at like another 4 or 5 song EP coming pretty soon, exploring some interesting and amusing subject matter. So yes, I have done that, Dee. That's a great question. You guys are talking amongst yourselves and not posting me questions to ask. And you're talking about Jimi Hendrix used coiled cables. Yeah. So yeah, so there you go. It is a practice I kind of do. Going back to Dee Dee's question, is kind of whenever I abandon something because maybe I don't like it, or maybe I like it but I don't really see a future for it. It goes on that kind of I call it my outtakes drive, and it's not really an outtakes drive because there are hardly any outtakes on it. But it's kind of like stuff that I discard and I don't want to chuck away forever. And so, a little bit of melody here, a little bit of, maybe a little groove or a vamp here. And then, those two from 2 totally different projects might meet and they might actually form a song. It does happen. For the most part, when I write my songs, they're all fully complete and realized in my head. And it's just a case of almost transcribing it out and then recording it into Studio One and then mixing it. And just making it sound like it sounds in my head. And, that for me is my whole production process, 99% of the time. But, there are still things that I abandon because I can be quite the perfectionist and a little bit petulant from time to time, which basically means I can be working on something and I can have the whole thing fully realized in my head, and I start recording it, and I just go, nah, this isn't working. And it will go into the outtakes box, the outtakes drive. And then I'll work on something else. And I might revisit it, and I may never revisit it. That does happen. Jose Ramirez, hello, good to see you. I think you are new to my show, so welcome. And in fact, this is not my show. This is Songwriting Simplified, which is a show that I normally do with Jonny Geib. It's a joint show, and it's normally on the Home Studio Trainer channel. But tonight, for extenuating circumstances, it is on my channel. But very, very glad to have you here. I do a regular show on Sundays on this channel, which is called Sunday Night Live, and that's at 6 p.m. Central Time, which is midnight UK, 1 a.m. Central European Time. So by all means, come along to that as well. Jose says, to say that I'm a beginner to music would be a huge understatement, and my biggest challenge seems to be putting words together into melody. Any advice? Start with a story or a character and start there. You know, kind of before you start even thinking about music necessarily. If the area of struggle for you is words, start there. Start with a story. Start with characters. You know, even if it's just one character, one person, and you want to describe them in the form of a song, and you may mention them by name, you may not mention them by name. And here's the thing: a good rule of thumb with songwriting, and this is the way when I am just writing just lyrics, because there are people that I work with where I just write the lyrics and they write the music. And then there are other folks that I work with where it's the other way around. I'll write the music and they'll write the lyrics. And, you know, so I have various songwriting partnerships that I work in. But where I am just writing lyrics, I start with a story, with characters, with a scene, with, you know, a setting. And I get all the details in. And then what I do is, once I've got the details in and everything is very clearly laid out, very, very descriptively, to the point where you're kind of sitting there, and as you're reading it, it's like prose and the image fills your mind. At that point, I'm like 90% of the way there. And then I do something that most people would never think of doing, having written this beautifully descriptive thing. I start chopping it up. I start chopping it up into pieces, because when I'm writing a song, I don't want to be explicitly stating something or explicitly describing someone or something or an event or a scenario. I want to suggest, because the more I can suggest and leave to the listener's imagination, the more they will engage their emotions, the more they will engage their imagination and their desires and project those into the music, into the song, and they will find themselves sucked into the story. They'll find themselves sucked into the imagery, and before you know it, they are as engaged mentally and with the scenario pictured in their mind's eye by suggestion than as they would if they had the whole thing just written out in Robert Louis Stevenson style descriptive narrative, which is what Robert Louis Stevenson does better than most other writers on the planet, or at least did. Is that what he did was he could, you know, if you've ever read Treasure Island, for example, you will see that there are 2 or 3 pages where there is no dialogue, and it is all describing, either setting a scene or describing action taking place. And it's done in such glorious detail that you can close your eyes and you see the whole thing unfolding in your mind's eye. And so I try to get to that point, and then I break it all up and I make it suggestion. So rather than explicitly stating, this person walks over to that person and smacks them in the face, I will do it by suggestion, so that what actually really takes place is all in the listener's mind, rather than by me explicitly stating something. I hope you follow with what I'm saying here. And you can do this with rhyme. You can do this with no rhymes. And in actual fact, sometimes doing one or the other, like if you're setting up a pattern where you're using rhyming couplets, you can surprise the listener by suddenly switching from rhyming couplets to no rhyme at all. And you can flip it the other way around in order to enhance or underline a particular person, character, image, or piece of action that's taking place in your song, or to underscore a particular point that you want to make. Or you can speed up the rhyming. So instead of rhyming every other line, you rhyme every line, and then you compound that more, and you have a rhyme every 4 words. Or you just string a whole line of rhyming words together. And this is what rap artists do really, really well. If you want to learn how to write lyrics, go and study rap. Even if you hate the genre, go look at the lyrics. Because they have this down to the finest of fine arts. My opinion. But that is a terrific question, Jose. Thank you very much for asking that one. That is great. Who's that pinging me? I'll find that out in just a minute. Just Bob says, how often do you write in major keys and realize that it should be minor key instead? You switch it to minor. How much rework does that cause or change? It's a good question. I don't tend to do that very much. Or rather, that doesn't really tend to happen to me, because the key or the mode, which is what you're talking about, major or minor, the mode of the song is, for me, already laid out in the narrative, in the story, in the characters, in the scenario. And that will already determine what the mode of the song is going to be, whether it's going to be major or minor. Like if I'm writing something that I think needs to be tense, or needs to be dark, or needs to be mysterious, then that's going to be a minor key, or it's going to be modal, and no suggestion of major or minor at all. So I don't tend to start minor and go, yeah, this should be major, because that is already kind of set in stone for me with what the song is actually about. Now the way I tend to work is I tend to write music first, and then kind of the lyrics kind of come to me afterwards. The story develops and the narrative comes afterwards. So, there is a degree to which, I can have a great little, I'm shocking at piano today. And I might have something that sounds really cool like that. And I think, yeah, this is really great. And then I start building the whole song out of that. And then I go, yeah, but kind of, yeah, that doesn't really happen to me very much, because, as I say, I'm listening to the music, and, because I work all of this out, and then I do a mix down, and I send that mix down to my Dropbox. I have Dropbox on my phone, and I will spend a couple of days just listening just to the music. And then the lyrics and everything else, the story, the narrative, the whole scenario comes to me out of that experience. So if what I've created is minor and dark and laid, fully loaded with tension, then I'm going to do one or two things with my lyrics. One, I'm going to go with that. Or two, I'm going to juxtapose. What do I mean by juxtapose? What I mean by juxtapose is I'm going to write something up and up-tempo and upbeat and happy and bright in contrast to this kind of dark, tense little vamp thing that I've got going on in the music. So I'll either go with the mood created by the music, or I'll juxtapose it for as an extra kind of layer of tension. So yeah, so that doesn't happen to me very often at all. Budbox Guitar says, I remember you saying we should plan and put a time aside for recording or writing each day. Do you put aside time for yourself for songwriting? If so, how much for each day? Well, now that I have effectively 2 full-time jobs, I have my business, I have JonnyLipshamStudios.co.uk. That is a full-time job. I also have my job at Presonus, which is a full-time job as well. So I have 2 full-time jobs. Plus with coronavirus and lockdown and everything else, I've been homeschooling my kids as well. So effectively, I have 3 jobs on the go at the same time. So the amount of time that I have available at the moment for songwriting is pretty minimal, to say the least. However, under normal circumstances, with my kids back at school full time, which will happen in August, the house will be nice and empty and quiet. And whilst I am on my lunch breaks, I can sit and I can be working on a song. And then when I get off shift at Presonus, I can be working on a song as well. Yeah, scheduling is so important, especially when you're busy, because otherwise you don't achieve anything. You don't end up practicing anything. You know, if I don't schedule in my piano practice, my bass practice, my drum practice, and doing vocal exercises, if I don't actually schedule them in either to the week or to each day, then they just don't ever happen. And then my piano chops go to the donkey's buttocks, or my bass playing does, or my singing does, and my already rather large vocal range of nearly 4 octaves will shrink. And I don't want that to happen. I want to be able to use my full range, because by using my full range and having that available, it means I can do vocal session work, and I can sing pretty much any part that anybody throws in front of me. And that's important to me, to be able to do that and work in that way. So scheduling, whichever way you want to say it, is everything if you want to get good at a craft. If you want to get good at something in any art form, you have to schedule in when you're going to do it. And if that means you have to say, right, Monday to Friday, I work at Presonus, but I have an hour for lunch every single day. That's great. That's time that I've got whilst I'm eating to be able to work on something. And rather than just being vague and saying working on something, I have to be specific and say, right, on Monday I'm working on this. On Tuesday lunchtime I'm working on this. On Wednesday lunchtime I'm working on this. Because if I don't, then that lunchtime I sit down and go, right, it's songwriting time. Where do I start? And then that lunchtime finishes and I'm back to work and I've achieved absolutely nothing. And I don't want to do that. So planning things and being just a little bit meticulous about your details will pay in the long term. It might mean a sacrifice now, but the long-term gain is going to be better because, you know, by the time you have reached your release or your day for recording, I should say, you've got a stack of songs ready to go and you're ready to start recording. So if you want to release an EP, let's say, for argument's sake, you're going to release an EP in the spring of next year. So let's say April. Let's say you pick an arbitrary date in April, say April the 15th or something like that. And you go, right, April 15th, that is my release day. Then you work back and you go, okay, what happens before release? Oh yeah, mastering. How long is that going to take? And then you build in a little bit of buffer into that as well. So you've got some spare time. And then you go, what happens before mastering? Oh yeah, mixing. How long is that going to take? It's going to take roughly this amount of time. Okay, add a little bit of padding, a bit of buffer. Okay, and then you go, okay, so what happens before mixing? Oh yeah, I've got to record the songs. How long's that going to take? Add in some buffering, some reserve days, just in case certain aspects of recording go wrong. You've got those available. What happens before recording? Oh yeah, I need to have some songs to record, so I need some time to write. How long's that going to take? Again, build in reserve days. I think you get my drift here. But even if you're not targeting a release of any kind, then you can certainly say, I want to have achieved being able to do X. Mark it down. Have a date by which you are going to achieve that thing. If it's, I'm going to mix a whole album for X client or X friend, there's my deadline. I'm going to have it done by then. I mean, the client may, if you're doing this professionally, the client will set that for you. And you'll have to then reverse plan to make sure that you don't miss that deadline. And I do that all the time with my mixing clients. So, you reverse engineer everything in order to make sure that you don't miss your deadlines. And I'm finding in more and more with what I do now, how important reverse engineering really is. It's incredibly important to know the end from the beginning so that you actually have somewhere to start and then a plan to complete. Because otherwise, nothing ever happens. So I hope that helps. How much rework does that cause or change? Talking about major flipping modes. You will, if you have started something in the major and you decide you want to make it minor, so you started something in G major, but then you decide, I don't want to do it in G major, but I want to stay in that kind of tonal center because it fits my melodic range. Maybe the melodic, the melodic range of your song is from G to E. It's only a major sixth, and that's pretty large for most pop songs these days. So if that's your range for your song, but then you decide, I want to make this minor. Well, then you've got a choice to make. Is it going to be melodic minor, which would be fine having the E natural? If it's going to be modal, is it going to be harmonic minor? In which case, yes, you want the E flat there. So just changing mode means you have to think about different accidentals, because in the key of G major, if you've ever seen what the key of G major looks like on a sheet of paper, there is only one accidental, and that is that every F is always sharp. So it's always F sharp, because that fits the scale. All right, but if you're going to do G minor, you take away, depending on which minor scale you are using, harmonic or melodic minor. If you're using harmonic minor, then yes, you would need that F sharp, even though technically the F sharp is not in the key of G minor, but it remains in the scale. But in the key of G minor, you have two flats. You have B flat and E flat, because the relative major of G minor is B flat major. There's your G minor right there. So you have to rethink your harmony. So let's take a typical, G, E minor, C, and D in G major. So you decide that you want that to be minor instead, bear in mind all of these other accidentals, the B flat and E flat, okay? So we're going to go with that harmonic minor, which, to be honest, most popular music uses the melodic minor rather than the harmonic minor. But we're going to use, because we have those two accidentals, we're going to make sure that we use them. So not only does it sound completely different, but it requires completely different chords. So instead of the G major, E minor, C, and D, you have to use G minor. But because we've got the E flat in the scale, instead of doing E minor, we have to do E flat major. And then C minor, because chord 4 in G minor is C minor. And then D7, or D7 flat 9. Alright, so those are generally the rules that would apply, but as Hans Zimmer says, once you know and fully understand a rule, break it. You're absolutely at liberty to break a rule once you understand how it works. You've got to obey the rules to find out how they work, and then once you know how they work and you fully understand them, you know how to apply them and make them work, then you can break the rules and you can bend them. And sometimes you can completely circumvent rules. It works. So if I was absolutely desperately determined that I wanted to have an E and not an E flat in the key of G minor, you would have to do an E kind of diminished kind of thing. Half diminished. So you'd have to do this. Which would still work. But then this move to C minor suddenly becomes a little bit unnatural. So what I would suggest then, if you're going to do that, would be to use E flat instead. So G, E half diminished, E flat, and D would work a lot better. And there you have how to shift something that is in major to minor, but keeping the same key center of G. So I hope that helps. That was a relatively long answer to your question there. Let's see. Reverse engineer everything. B, bring a spare power cable. Absolutely. Mikan is quite correct. Just Bob says, thanks for doing this show. Great show. Great time as always. You're very welcome. We are coming towards the end of it. I do not do anything JL is talking about, and I never get anything done. There you go, John. Not only is that a confession, but you have just taught yourself a lesson, my friend. Yep, it does work. I'm being messaged galore here. Just give me 1 second. I need to find out what's going on here. Okay, cool. Nothing to be alarmed about. Now, where are you guys? You guys are over here. There we go. Fantastic discussion and demo. Yep, I hope that really helps. That kind of changing something from minor into major. And you can do it the other way around as well. You know, if you have something that is minor and you want to make it major, you can do that. But you have to think about the music theory that is involved in that. And some of that, even if you're not a music theorist, you're not a musicologist, you have never studied any music theory, here's the thing. Use your ears. Your ears are your final line of defense as to whether something works or not. And sometimes, even within the framework of music theory, you may go, you know what, that does work or that doesn't work. And your ears will decide, even if you are within the framework of music theory, like that was more correct, but you could do that E half diminished thing and it would be okay. But as we found out, it sounded better instead of using the C minor, using the E flat. That kind of just generally sounded better because of, having the E natural in the chord for that E half diminished thing. Sounds more natural going to the E flat rather than the C minor. But again, that's your ear. Your ear might decide otherwise. Your ear might go, actually, I prefer the C minor. In which case, go with the C minor. Be confident in your decision making. And once you've made a decision, stick with it. That's the other important thing about what you write, is when you've made a decision about what you're writing, stick with it and see it through. And then when you get to the end of it, then you can assess whether that was a wise decision or not. And you'll have actually learned a better lesson at the end of it than if you don't stick to it. If you kind of go, oh, okay, I'm already 2/3 of the way through this song, and suddenly I don't like the fact that 6 weeks ago I made a decision to change this chord here, and now I've decided it doesn't work. Well, by the time you've got to 6 weeks' time, you're right in the middle of recording. Do you really want to go, hey guys, can you come back in and do another session so we can just drop in another chord because I don't like that chord anymore? You have to have the courage of your convictions and stick with it. And even if that means that once you've actually released your EP and there's that one song on the EP and you go, I really hate that chord in that verse. I really hate that chord. But you got the record out there. And at the end of the day, your listening public may well go, actually, that's great. That chord is perfect. It fits. It does exactly what my ears suggest it should do. And actually, most times it turns out that the only person that is objecting to the use of that chord is you. Nobody else is bothered by it. I have that all the time. Trust me. I get to that point where I'm nearly done recording a song and I'm just like, actually, I'm not really sure I like that little rhyme, that particular rhyme. It's weak. I could have said, and actually I had this happen on my Belonging to Tomorrow EP from 2016. There's a song on that record called Flying High. And the song is all about a guy who has aspirations to be a great jazz saxophone player, and his hero is Charlie Parker. But he's a modern day saxophone player, and he hankers for that period in New York on 52nd Street when bebop was being pioneered, and 52nd Street was lined on both sides from one end of the street to the other with jazz clubs. And there were 50 or 60 jazz clubs on 52nd Street. And he hankers after that, and he has these daydreams, these little fantasies that go on in his head where he's, in one of these joints like the Three Juices or the Famous Door, which I think I chose the Famous Door in this particular case for this song. And, there was, in his little fantasy world, he's playing the most incredible solo on a particular song, and he's absolutely nailing it. And on the front row, the table at the front, there's this beautiful redhead. And I'm describing this redheaded woman from the point of view of this character, this saxophone player's point of view. And I used the word ginger to refer to her hair. And I had actually finished the song and was mixing it. And suddenly, as I was mixing it, I stopped myself and I said, there's a better word than ginger. Because I didn't really mean ginger, because to me this character had, it's kind of ginger but red hair. And to me, I kind of thought there's a better word for it. And I went flicking through a thesaurus to try and find this better word. And the better word was Titian. I was just like, that's the color. It's not ginger at all. It's Titian. But it's too late. The song is already done. I'm already mixing it. And to this day, whenever I listen to that listen to that song, I'm just like, damn it. I should have said Titian. But I didn't, and I wish I had. But I had to stick to it. I could have, in the midst of that mix session, just drop in the word Titian, because I was the singer on the record. I could have just done that, but I didn't. I was like, nope, that's the decision I made at the time when I was writing that song, and I know it was not the best decision, but I'm going to stick with it. Because that's the decision, that's the choice that I made. And I have learned from it, because the next time I'm writing a song and there is a red-headed woman character in this song, I will describe her hair as Titian, not ginger. So there you go. So I hope all of that helps, guys. We did actually make it through the hour, by the way, but that's your fault, because you guys got me talking about deep things. So I appreciate that very much. You guys have been a fantastic crowd. And I think we peaked at around about 15. Did we? Yeah, we did. We peaked at 17, which is not bad at all for a solo Songwriting Simplified show. So I appreciate your company. I appreciate your questions in the chat. You guys have been awesome as usual. So I will be back here on Sunday for Sunday Night Live at 6 p.m. Central. Different graphics, but pretty much the same place. And we will have something else extremely funky and cool to talk about. So I will see you on Sunday. Take care. Have fun with your making music. And I'll see you then. Cheers, folks. Sorry, I was trying to find my end screen, and I was horribly distracted mid-sentence. Take care, folks. Good night.